Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where we bring you heartfelt tales that resonate with the deepest parts of the human experience. Today, we dive into a powerful story of love, sacrifice, and justice, as Judge Michael Bennett faces an emotional journey to protect the daughter he never knew. Stay with us as we unfold a story that will tug at your heartstrings and leave you with a lasting message of hope. It was a crisp, early morning when Emma Johnson, a small, quiet figure in a violet dress, stepped into the courtroom. Her feet barely touched the floor as she sat nervously clutching a well-worn photograph. The atmosphere was tense, the air heavy with legal jargon and impersonal reports. Judge Michael Bennett, a man known for his calm composure and measured decisions, sat at the bench, his fingers methodically smoothing the black robe he had worn for countless cases. Today, however, something felt different. It wasn't just the case, the one concerning Emma's custody. It was something about the girl that tugged at his heartstrings. A subtle intuition that something deep was shifting. Judge Bennett had been in the system for years, dealing with complex cases involving children caught in the web of broken homes, foster care, and bureaucracy. But today, he felt a sense of unease that he couldn't shake. He studied Emma as she sat quietly, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that seemed both out of place for her age and yet wise beyond it. His gaze lingered longer than usual, but he quickly shifted his attention to the social worker, Clara Newman. As she approached the podium, "Your Honor," Clara began, her voice steady but marked with exhaustion. "We are here today to determine the custody of Emma Johnson, aged 8. She gestured to Emma, who shrank a little at becoming the center of attention, her hand slipping into the pocket of her dress to hold something hidden within. The courtroom filled with the typical buzz of legal proceedings, arguments about foster placements, inquiries about family backgrounds, and standard protocol, but none of this seemed to reach Emma. She was quiet, as if absorbed in her own thoughts. Her little fingers curled tightly around the object she had pulled from her pocket. As the hours dragged on, the legal discussions became more tedious, and Judge Bennett found himself repeatedly looking at Emma. Her stoic expression, the occasional flicker of emotions that seemed to pass through her eyes, hope, fear, resignation, made him wonder what she was really thinking. She seemed so out of place in this room full of adults arguing over her fate. She wasn't just a number on a case file. She was a child whose life was hanging in the balance. Judge Bennett's thoughts were interrupted when Clara Newman asked, "Your Honor, what does Emma herself say about her preferences?" Clara's words brought the room's attention back to Emma, and Judge Bennett raised an eyebrow. He had been observing her closely, and something about her demeanor, her silent dignity in the face of such uncertainty, struck him deeply. He could sense that she was holding something precious in her pocket, a silent testament to her past, to the woman who had raised her, to the life she was losing. Emma's small voice broke the silence, cutting through the tension like a sudden gust of wind. "Your Honor," she said, standing up from her seat, her hands gripping the wooden bench in front of her. The courtroom froze. "You're my daddy." The words hung in the air, suspended in a moment that would change everything. Gasps rippled through the room, and all eyes turned to Judge Bennett. His heart skipped a beat, and his composed exterior faltered for the first time in years. He gripped the edge of his bench, his knuckles whitening. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond to the truth that was now staring him in the face. Emma's words shattered the barriers of his professional mask, and in that moment, the walls he had so carefully built over the years began to crumble. The room fell into a stunned silence. Emma's eyes never left him, her gaze filled with hope, trust, and a longing that made his chest tighten. She wasn't just a little girl caught in the system. She was his daughter. The DNA test confirmed it, the years of absence. The memories of Maria, Emma's mother, came rushing back in a flood of guilt and emotion. The realization hit him hard. Maria, the woman he had once loved, had vanished without a trace. He had never known she had a child. Never known that he was Emma's father. The truth had been buried for years, hidden beneath layers of painful memories and a past he had long tried to forget. As the courtroom erupted into whispers, Judge Bennett's mind raced. The life he had so carefully built, his dedication to justice, to being a fair and impartial judge, all of it felt irrelevant now. He wasn't just a judge anymore. He was a father. And Emma, standing before him, was his daughter, his flesh and blood. For the rest of the day, Judge Bennett's thoughts were a whirlwind. He couldn't focus on the legal proceedings. Every word, every argument, seemed distant and muffled. He was no longer just presiding over a case, he was caught in the middle of his own personal crisis. And in the pit of his stomach, he knew there was more to this story. More that Emma had been holding back. As the court recessed for the day, Judge Bennett stood at the bench, his mind racing with the implications of Emma's revelation. He knew that whatever came next would forever change both their lives. And though the legal battle had only just begun, in his heart, a promise was already forming: he would protect her, no matter what it took. That evening, as he sat alone in his chambers, Michael Bennett couldn't help but think about the past, about Maria and the secrets she had kept, about the daughter he never knew he had, and about the life they could now build together. But the road ahead was not going to be easy. Emma's presence in his life would expose wounds he had long kept buried. Yet, deep down, he knew that this was the beginning of something profound, a second chance at redemption, at love, and at healing. The following days were a blur for Judge Michael Bennett. The revelation that he was Emma's father had rocked him to his core. While he tried to maintain his professional composure, his mind couldn't stop replaying the moment Emma had spoken those words. Her face, filled with trust and vulnerability, haunted him, as did the weight of the long years they had missed together. He tried to focus on his judicial duties, but the case regarding Emma's custody kept pulling him back to thoughts of his past with Maria, Emma's mother. His heart ached with every memory. Maria had always been a woman of fierce spirit, one who fought for justice and fairness, values that had deeply influenced him. Yet, even though they had shared dreams and aspirations, Maria had chosen to keep their child a secret. The reasons for her silence were now clear to him, but they only deepened the mystery surrounding their past. As Michael sat at his desk late one evening, poring over case files and legal documents, his thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Clara Newman, the social worker overseeing Emma's case, entered with a solemn look on her face. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady but filled with concern. "There's something you need to see." She placed a folder on his desk, and Michael's heart sank as he opened it. Inside were documents that appeared to be sealed court files and records, files that should not have been buried or hidden in any way. Michael's fingers traced over the official seal, his mind racing. "What are these?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara hesitated for a moment before responding. "I don't know yet. But there's something strange about the timing of these documents. They were sealed just months before Maria's accident. And there's more, files that should have been accessible. But now they've vanished." A sense of dread washed over him. He had suspected that Maria's past had been far more complicated than he had ever known. But this was something else entirely. His thoughts flashed back to the days when he had been a young, idealistic law student. The days when Maria's sudden disappearance had torn him apart. He had never known what happened to her. But now, it seemed that the answers might lie in these missing documents. As Clara continued to explain the situation, Michael's mind wandered. He had built a life dedicated to justice, to righting wrongs. But now, it seemed that his world was being turned upside down. He wasn't just uncovering the truth about Maria's disappearance, he was digging into a network of corruption that ran deeper than he had ever imagined. Michael's first instinct was to take action, to pursue the truth. But Clara's voice snapped him back to reality. Be careful, she warned. If someone is trying to bury this information, it means they have something to hide. And they'll stop at nothing to protect themselves. Michael's jaw tightened, his resolve hardening. He knew that uncovering the truth about Maria, about Emma's past, and about the people who had manipulated the system, would not be easy. But it was a fight he had to take on for Emma's sake, for Maria's memory, and for his own sense of honor. The next day, Michael called in a trusted colleague, Detective James Turner. James had worked with him on a number of cases involving corruption, and Michael knew that if anyone could help him uncover the truth, it was him. They met in a small, quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. Michael slid the sealed folder across the table to James, his eyes scanning the detective's face for any sign of recognition. I need your help, Michael said, his voice low. These files, they're connected to Maria. There's something here I don't understand. I think there's a conspiracy, a network pulling strings behind the scenes. I need you to dig deeper. Find out who's involved, and what they're hiding. James nodded, his expression grave. I'll do what I can. But be careful. People with power will fight back hard to protect their secrets. Michael's heart pounded as he thought of Emma. She had already lost so much, her mother, a stable home, and a future free from fear. He couldn't let her lose any more. But what he was about to uncover might change everything. And it wouldn't come without a cost. Later that evening, Michael sat alone in his study, the weight of the situation pressing on him. He knew he had to protect Emma at all costs. But as the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone in the system was pulling strings behind the scenes, someone who had the power to destroy everything Michael had worked for. As the days passed, Detective James uncovered more pieces of the puzzle. The sealed files led them to a network of individuals with connections to powerful figures within the judicial and foster care systems. The deeper James dug, the clearer it became there was a systematic effort to manipulate the foster care system for profit. And at the heart of this conspiracy was a woman, Angela Morrison, a judge whose professional reputation had always been impeccable. But Michael knew now that appearances were deceiving. He had suspected her role in Maria's past, but he never imagined she was the mastermind behind a network that exploited vulnerable children. Michael's phone rang late one night. It was James. You were right, James said, his voice tight with tension. Morrison's involved in something much bigger than we thought. She's been accepting bribes to place children with certain families. And those families? They're involved in illegal adoption rings and child trafficking. Michael felt a cold chill run down his spine. We have to stop this, he said, his voice barely audible. But as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Michael knew that bringing this truth to light would come at a price. It was not just a battle for justice, it was a fight for his daughter's safety. And he would stop at nothing to protect her. In the midst of this chaos, as Michael worked tirelessly to uncover the dark forces at play, he couldn't help but look at Emma and wonder how much longer she could remain untouched by the storm that was rapidly approaching. The storm of corruption swirling around Michael Bennett's life was closing in. Every day, the pressure mounted as the web of deceit that had entangled the judicial and foster care systems began to unravel. the deeper Michael and Detective James Turner dug, the more they uncovered: bribes, illegal adoptions, and a complex network of powerful people willing to destroy anyone who stood in their way. Yet, amid the chaos and danger, Michael's thoughts never strayed far from Emma. He had promised her that he would keep her safe. But with every revelation, the threat against them both grew. He knew that Angela Morrison's influence stretched far beyond the courthouse, and she would stop at nothing to protect her own secrets. The battle for Emma's custody and their future together had now become a battle for survival. Late one night, as Michael sat at his desk in the quiet of his study, the weight of everything began to overwhelm him. His eyes wandered over the picture of Maria, his late love, and the photograph of Emma, his newfound daughter. It was a reminder of everything he had lost and everything he had gained. He had spent years burying his emotions behind the walls of the courtroom. But now, as the truth came to light, he could no longer ignore the love he felt for Emma. Suddenly, the phone rang, breaking the silence. It was James. "We have the evidence," James said, his voice low but filled with urgency. "The video footage, the bank records, everything. We can take it to the authorities. But we need to act fast. Morrison is on the move. She knows we're onto her." Michael's heart raced. He had waited for this moment, the moment when the truth would be revealed, but the fear of what might happen to Emma, to their fragile bond, gripped him. "How much time do we have?" Michael asked, trying to steady his voice. "Not much," James replied. "We need to move before she tries to cover her tracks again." Michael stood up, his mind racing. He couldn't let this go on any longer. He had to protect Emma and Maria's legacy, no matter the cost. The following morning, Michael and James worked together to arrange for the evidence to be presented to the authorities. The risks were high, but they both knew the importance of exposing the truth. With the video footage and the financial records in hand, they presented their findings to federal investigators. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Michael felt a weight lift off his shoulders. But the relief was short-lived. Morrison was already making her move, and she had her sights set on destroying everything Michael had fought for. Meanwhile, at home, Emma seemed to sense the growing tension in the air. She had been quiet for days, her small hand always clutching the photograph of Maria. Michael had tried to reassure her, but he could see the worry in her eyes. She had already lost so much, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead was becoming too much for her to bear. "Are you okay?" Michael asked one evening as he sat beside her on the couch, his voice soft and comforting. Emma nodded, but Michael could see the fear in her eyes. She was no longer the timid child who had first entered his life. The girl before him was strong, determined, and filled with love for the family she had found in him. But there were still shadows lingering in her heart, memories of a life she didn't fully understand, and a fear of losing it all again. "I'm scared," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "What if they take me away?" Michael's heart ached for her. He reached for her hand, his own trembling as he gently held it. "No one is going to take you away, Emma. I promise you that." But the promise felt fragile. As the investigation into Morrison's corruption deepened, Michael knew that they were walking a dangerous path. The truth was on their side, but the forces they were up against were powerful. They would not stop until they had silenced him and destroyed his chances of keeping Emma. As the day of the final custody hearing approached, Michael found himself torn between his duty to uphold the law and his desire to protect his daughter. It was a fight he could not lose, not just for his own sake, but for Emma's. She needed him. On the day of the hearing, The courtroom was packed with reporters and onlookers, their eyes fixed on the drama unfolding. Michael sat at the defense table, his hands clasped tightly together as he prepared to make his final argument. Across from him, Angela Morrison sat with an air of smug confidence, her eyes cold and calculating. She had no idea that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. Clara Newman, the social worker, took the stand first, her voice calm and measured as she testified to the progress Emma had made since moving in with Michael. Her report was glowing. Emma was thriving. Her academic performance had improved. And most importantly, she had begun to trust again. The bond between father and daughter was undeniable. And Clara's testimony reflected that. Then it was Michael's turn. He stood before the judge, his heart pounding in his chest. He had practiced his words over and over in his mind. But now that he was here, facing the woman who had tried to tear his family apart, the words felt insufficient. "Your Honor," Michael began, his voice steady despite the emotions that churned within him. "I stand before you not just as a judge, but as a father. The love I have for my daughter, Emma, is not something I can put into words. It's something that has grown between us. Something that has changed both of us for the better. I've seen her transform into the strong, resilient young girl she is today. And I will do everything in my power to protect her and give her the life she deserves." He paused, looking over at Emma, who was sitting quietly beside Clara. Her small face was filled with hope, but her eyes were wide with fear. Michael's heart swelled with love for her. "I ask you, Your Honor, to look at the facts, the progress Emma has made in a stable, loving environment. She deserves a chance to grow, to thrive, to be the child she was meant to be. And I will give her that." The courtroom fell silent as Michael finished his statement. He had laid everything on the line, not just for Emma's future, but for the hope that their family could survive this storm. But just as Michael thought the worst was over, Judge Thompson's voice rang out, and the final decision was about to be made. Would justice prevail? Or would the shadow of corruption continue to haunt their lives? The answer would come soon. Thank you for watching and joining us on this emotional journey today. We hope Judge Michael and Emma's story has touched your heart as much as it has ours. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Empathy Stories for more powerful tales that highlight the beauty of human connection. Stay tuned for more stories that will leave you thinking long after the video ends.